Hey guys, Jake here. A boy is brutally killed by a Mononoke, only to be possessed by a legendary cat demon that grants him all its powers before he's recruited by an anti-Mononoke agency and paired with a thick baddie. This is the story of Jiro Azuma, a young man born into a long line of ninjas who has been able to talk to animals since birth. Because of this, he was bullied at school, but his dog, Nachi, tells him that he shouldn't feel bad because it's a very special gift. Wow, I wish someone would tell me that too. Years pass and we now find Jiro surrounded by a group of thugs who tell him he's standing on their turf. Jiro isn't intimidated, which infuriates the leader of the group who lunges at him but ends up falling into the river instead. Jiro then turns to face the other two, who start to wonder nervously if he might actually be a ninja. Just like their leader, they end up in the river as well, and the group runs off. Right after that, Jiro hears a voice thanking him, and it turns out to belong to a cat. The cat is relieved that he and his friends will finally be able to live in peace in that area, but he's worried that Jiro may have made enemies by stepping in. Jiro isn't concerned since he's used to that kind of trouble by now. A crow teases him, telling him that with a face like his, he'll never get a girlfriend. After saying goodbye and heading home, Jiro gets scolded by his grandfather, who has already heard about the fight and complains that he didn't teach him shinobi arts just so he could go around brawling. The grandfather throws a few kunai at him and then shows him the Azuma family's heirloom. The great shinobi sword, he explains, was given to their family by the shogun himself during the Edo period, so Jiro should honor his roots and act like a true member of the Azuma clan. Jiro rudely replies that it's probably a fake sword, which enrages his grandfather, who draws the blade to prove its sharpness and starts slicing through everything in sight. Jiro is left to clean up the mess afterward. His grandfather then tells him that there's a neighborhood meeting that night, and he won't be back until late, reminding him to lock the door. Jiro agrees, though. He thinks to himself that he's not a kid anymore. Just then, the crow shows up to tell him there's a cat in trouble in the forest. The crow leads the way, and when they arrive, Jiro is startled by the cat's condition. He asks the crow if he knows the cat, but the crow says he's never seen it before, and that no matter how much he called out to it, it never responded. Jiro can see the cat is in bad shape when suddenly a voice, the cat's, demands to know who dares disturb him. Another voice then addresses him as Rago, the black star of misfortune and devourer of the sun, asking him to wake from his slumber and lend them his power. Rago tells them to rot and warns that they'll regret interrupting his rest. He doesn't take orders from anyone. In response, they tell him that this will then be the place where he dies. A while later, Rago opens his eyes and finds himself in Jiro's room. Jiro happens to walk in just then, glad to see him awake. He offers him some food, introduces himself, and asks for his name. The cat doesn't answer, and Jiro asks what's wrong, since even stray cats have names. The cat wonders to himself who this idiot is, assuming there's no point trying to explain anything to him when Jiro tells him not to call him an idiot. The cat is stunned and immediately hides under the bed. Jiro tells him to come out already, while the cat thinks to himself that he can't sense any spiritual energy coming from the boy, meaning he really is human. Since the cat won't budge, Jiro decides to bring out his secret weapon. The cat is confident nothing will get him to come out, but the secret weapon works anyway. Jiro remarks that, as the saying goes, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Jiro finds it funny that a cat would consider himself a man, and the cat corrects him he's not a cat. He introduces himself as Rago, an immortal, a Mononoke, explaining that beings like him usually take human or animal form, with some living alone in the mountains or deep in the forest. Jiro asks if Mononoke are like him, and Rago can tell he's not lying. The boy genuinely has no idea what he's talking about. Rago reveals that he was attacked by other Mononoke, though he doesn't remember much since he was in a deep sleep. The only thing he recalls is being surrounded after being woken up. They had come to ask for his help, but he wasn't interested and told them to get lost. Jiro asks why he turned them away if they were fellow Mononoke, and Rago explains that he despises his own kind. Nothing but arrogant parasites who hide their weakness behind the strength of others. Jiro immediately relates to that feeling, though. Rago tells himself not to get too invested, since Jiro is human and won't believe him anyway. Jiro replies that just because he doesn't understand everything doesn't mean he doesn't believe him. After all, he talks to animals himself, so it makes no difference to him that Rago is a Mononoke. Meanwhile, back in the forest where Rago had been lying wounded, a red-haired woman contacts headquarters to report finding blood that must belong to Rago, meaning he can't be far. Her superior orders her to hold off for now, saying he'll join the search team himself. She leaves and vanishes without a trace, while elsewhere a mysterious shadow is shown, smiling menacingly. Back at the house, Jiro is bathing Rago, and is surprised to see that his wounds have already healed, making him think there might be some truth to what Rago told him. Rago says he already knew Jiro wouldn't believe him, but Jiro replies that he believed about half of it. The other half sounded more like the ramblings of a dying cat. The situation reminds him of his beloved Nachi. his old dog, a big, beautiful, affectionate animal, the complete opposite of Rago. Rago asks if he has a death wish for saying that, while Jiro continues, explaining that back then he was badly bullied at school, and whenever Nachi saw him, she'd ask him to give her a bath so that all the bad things would wash away with the dirt. She would then tell him how glad she was to have him, but that whenever he could, she hoped he'd also help others, since that was a gift only he had. His words strike a chord with Rago, but just as he's about to say something, Jiro cuts him off to rinse him. A little later, Jiro is fast asleep, while Rago quietly apologizes, knowing he owes him one, but explains that he has to leave. Even though his wounds have healed, he still lacks strength, so he needs to go soon. Just then, Jiro appears and points out that he's still limping. Rago panics and asks what exactly Jiro did and how he got there so fast when he had been sound asleep moments earlier. Jiro explains that it was his kawarimi technique, adding that he has no intention of letting Rago leave in that condition. Rago tells him it's none of his business, but Jiro insists it became his business the moment he saved him. Rago snaps back that he never asked for help. He helped him because he wanted to, so Jiro should stop playing hero, since it wouldn't have mattered to him if he died there. Jiro asks why he'd say something like that, and Rago irritably tells him it's not his concern. That comment sets Jiro off, and he tells Rago to stop talking about dying so casually. In response, Rago flexes his power and warns him to shut up, reminding him that he hasn't forgotten what Rago is, a Mononoke, a spirit that devours humans. The two of them come from completely different worlds, so it would be best for Jiro to just leave him alone. Just then, a mysterious figure joins the confrontation, and Rago's expression drops. He knows they've come for him. Jiro tells the stranger he wasn't invited into his home and that he's picked a bad time to show up since he's already in a foul mood, warning him to leave. The figure instead transforms and tells him not to worry since he'll be devoured shortly. Luckily, Rago moves quickly to draw the creature's attention and get it away from the house, and the Mononoke chases after him to keep him from escaping. Jiro is stunned, but has no intention of leaving Rago to face this alone. Rago tries to create distance so he can strike, but the enemy doesn't allow it and slams him into the ground, remarking that he knew Rago was in bad shape, but not this bad. It's pathetic that the legendary Mononoke Rago, the black star of misfortune, has fallen this far. He tells Rago to stop wasting time since it's already taken a lot of effort to break the seal holding him prisoner, and he'd rather not have to kill a fellow Mononoke. Rago decides to go with him, reasoning that if they only want his power, they'll have to earn it, and to do that, they need to be ready to face death. The two clash violently, but Jiro unexpectedly joins the fight, using the family heirloom sword to slice off the Mononoke's arm. Rago demands to know what Jiro thinks he's doing, since this isn't some street brawl. Jiro tells him to be quiet. The wound only enrages the Mononoke further, and it begins to fully transform. Jiro tells Rago that when he helps someone, he means it, so he's not about to leave him to fight alone. Besides, even if he ran, the creature would eventually come after him anyway. The Mononoke admits Jiro is sharper than he looks, since it had indeed planned to kill him afterward, but finds it odd that his true form doesn't seem to faze the boy at all. It's also impressed by his swordsmanship and stealth, and asks if he comes from shinobi lineage, since if so, it will thoroughly enjoy devouring him. The creature charges at Jiro, who manages to dodge and counter with his sword, but in an instant, the Mononoke pierces through his chest, telling him he let his guard down. It urges him to surrender to avoid more suffering, but Jiro fights back and manages to break free, though he ultimately collapses to the ground. Rago approaches and looks down at him, saying he brought this on himself. The Mononoke suggests Rago devour Jiro to restore his own strength, since he must be starving too, but Rago orders it to shut up, since it's about to die. He tells Jiro that he ignored his warning not to get involved, and now his death will have made all of that meaningless. Rago admits he could devour Jiro now and regain his true form, but refuses, since he won't take orders from that insufferable demon. Instead, he decides that this time, Jiro will be the one to devour him. After all, he owes him one, and it's time to pay it back. The Mononoke asks what exactly Rago thinks he's doing as Rago merges into Jiro's body, ordering him to wake up. Meanwhile, the red-haired woman from earlier reports the situation to her boss, who tells her he can already see what's happening from where he is, and that things are about to get complicated. The Mononoke demands to know what Rago just did, giving his power to a human, and a shinobi no less. Jiro gets back up, confused about what's happening and why he has this strange power inside him now, but Rago speaks directly into his mind, telling him to focus and promising to explain everything once they're out of danger. The Mononoke attacks with everything it has, and Jiro dodges while still disoriented. Rago orders him to finish it off, insisting he needs to kill the creature before any explanations can happen. Jiro doesn't know how, but Rago tells him he'll lend a hand, literally instructing him to simply clench his fist. When he does, Jiro unleashes a powerful wave of dark energy that completely destroys the Mononoke's torso, leaving Jiro stunned at what lending a hand actually meant. With the enemy defeated, Jiro demands an explanation, but it will have to wait, since the red-haired woman shows up and orders him not to move or speak. Her boss arrives as well, lamenting that things have taken a turn for the worse again. Jiro asks if he's an ally of that monster, but the man tells him to calm down. They aren't Mononoke. They're members of an intelligence agency, simple government officials. He'll explain the details later, and that he can probably already guess the situation he's in. Jiro isn't willing to be taken quietly, but the curvy, well-built woman knocks him out cold. Her boss addresses her as Ichika and tells her not to overdo it, though Ichika replies that it's only temporary, since they don't want him getting confused and turning aggressive. She asks what they should do with him, and he orders that Jiro be taken to the hospital for testing, adding that they absolutely cannot let him die, since he's now extremely important. It's finally time to move the body, but the agents turn out to be complete cowards. Since Jiro is possessed, Ichika looks at her spineless colleagues in disgust and decides to drag the body away herself. Meanwhile, Jiro finds himself in some kind of hallucination, wondering where on earth he is. He remembers running into a strange cat and then being attacked by a monster. Just then, Rago speaks up, and Jiro asks him why he looks like he's floating. Rago replies by asking if he's even noticed the hole in his chest. Once Jiro registers that, he wakes up with a start. At first, he assumes it was all a dream, but checking his chest confirms otherwise. Right then, Ichika tells him he's been unconscious for a day and a half and quickly reports the news to her boss. Jiro asks who she is, but she simply ignores him and informs Ryusuke that he's woken up and seems fully lucid. Jiro grumbles about being ignored by that awful woman, and just then Rago pipes up in his head agreeing that she's pretty irritating. Meanwhile, Ryusuke approaches the room annoyed that his subordinate hung up on him mid-call, but before entering, he overhears a bit of bickering. When he finally steps in and sees Jiro doing fine, he's relieved and calls him quite the tough kid. He then asks Rago how he's doing, but Rago tells him he has nothing to say to some rude brat. Ryusuke understands that Rago doesn't trust him, but at least he doesn't seem to want to cause harm, which is a relief given what he'd feared. He takes the opportunity to formally introduce himself as Ryusuke Shiba from an intelligence agency. Jiro says he already knows and asks for the explanation they promised him. Shiba agrees to fill him in and asks if he's familiar with the Oniwaban. Jiro answers that they were undercover agents who worked for the shogunate during the Edo period, and Ryusuke is pleasantly surprised by how knowledgeable the boy is. He explains that after the Meiji Restoration, the Oniwaban became loyal to the new government instead of the shogunate. They were an elite group of government secret agents, and that organization still exists today as their intelligence agency. Their duties are essentially foreign espionage and counterintelligence, as well as hunting down and eliminating Mononoke. Since Mononoke rarely cause major incidents these days, most of their recent work has actually involved dealing with humans, protecting public figures, or investigating organizations. However, since their particular division specializes in Mononoke, they usually lead a fairly quiet life. At least that was true until recently, because a group of Mononoke attacked one of their facilities. And to be completely honest, what had been sealed away there was none other than Rago himself. Jiro finally understands why Rago told him he'd been asleep for so long. Now it's Ryusuke's turn to ask questions, and he wants to know exactly how Jiro ended up in this situation. Jiro tells them everything. Ichika can't believe how reckless he was and asks if something's wrong with him, but Jiro snaps back that she has no right to judge since she wasn't even there. While the two of them trade insults, Ryusuke wonders what on earth he's supposed to put in his report. The finer details can wait though, because the pressing issue is that Jiro is now fused with Rago and will essentially remain that way until he dies, since they have absolutely no idea how to reverse it. What they do know is how to search for a solution. And since they also have no idea what the other Mononoke are planning, Ryusuke will personally stay with Jiro to protect him. There's no alternative anyway. Police have already processed his missing person report, and everything is already in motion. He reminds Jiro that they're not like the heroes on TV, they're not obligated to respect his rights, and more importantly, he's not a child anymore, so he needs to take responsibility for his situation. He informs him that he'll be transferred to another facility the next day, and before leaving the room, he mentions that the entire hospital falls under his jurisdiction, meaning there are soldiers stationed everywhere. With that, he takes his leave. Just before Ichika walks out, Jiro notices the dog with her, though Ichika just glances at him and leaves without a word. A little later, Jiro realizes he's essentially a prisoner in that room. And to make matters worse, he's now officially a missing person. He wonders what will happen if he's stuck like this forever. Thinking about his grandfather, Rago reminds him that he warned him about this. But Jiro insisted on getting involved anyway. Jiro tells him not to lecture him, and Rago clarifies that's not what he meant. What's done is done. Even though that idiot Ryusuke claims all of this is for his protection, Jiro needs to think it through carefully. Ryusuke's group were the ones who sealed Rago away in the first place, so Jiro seriously doubts they'll treat him well now that he's fused with a Mononoke. And beyond the intelligence agency, there's also the rest of the Mononoke who came after Rago. the ones who woke him up, knowing full well they'd eventually have to answer to the agency for it. However he looks at it, he's completely alone right now, surrounded by people who are either furious with him or trying to use him for their own ends. At that point, Jiro lets out a frustrated shout. Rago asks if he's okay, and Jiro admits he's fed up with everyone doing whatever they please with him, so he's decided he'll start doing whatever he wants to. Rago asks if he's planning to run away, since he himself has no interest in fleeing. But Jiro tells him he plans to fight and give them all a beating instead. Rago warns him that he has no intention of saving him if things go wrong, but Jiro already has a plan. He uses the crows to distract the guards and makes his escape. Later that evening, as the sun sets, he thanks the crows and hands over the snacks he promised them. He then heads home, since he has something important to take care of. Telling his grandfather everything that happened, Rago asks if he's really sure his grandfather will believe him, and Jiro says he's confident he will. He asks Rago to lie low for a bit, and just as he's about to step onto the property, his grandfather appears behind him. Jiro tries to explain that he had to leave because of some things that came up, but he can't get into all the details. It's complicated. His grandfather simply orders him to follow without another word. A while later, after arriving at a baseball field, Jiro asks why they've come to this particular spot, and his grandfather explains that it's because no one will be able to interfere there right before landing a solid hit on him. He asks Jiro if he has any idea what he's done. Jiro, dazed, has no clue what just happened and regrets leaving, but doesn't think that warranted getting hit. His grandfather then reveals that Ryusuke Shiba already told him everything, that he knows Jiro is possessed by a Mononoke, and that the intelligence agency is after him. Startled, Jiro asks how he could possibly know that, and his grandfather explains that it's because he himself used to be a member of that same intelligence agency. Just then, Rago appears, remarking that it made sense now an old man that eager to kill wasn't just an ordinary grandfather. Seeing him confirms everything for the old man. He never would have believed it without seeing it firsthand. But now he knows exactly what he has to do: take responsibility for his grandson's mistake. He refuses to let either the intelligence agency or a Mononoke take advantage of Jiro. So he intends to destroy Rago along with him, and once that's done, he'll end his own life as well. Rago comments that this old man is something else. Jiro dodges an attack as Rago continues, saying there's no stopping him. Jiro agrees, adding that he's never seen his grandfather this furious before. In a single instant, the old man delivers a brutal beating and tells his grandson that the Azuma family has spent generations perfecting their technique, a martial art every bit as lethal against Mononoke as it is against humans. He admits he only ever taught Jiro the basics, enough for self-defense, but given the current situation, he's the one who will destroy him. Rago warns Jiro to be careful, but given how things are going, he'll have to step in himself since Jiro isn't reacting. The grandfather comes in for a killing blow, but Rago blocks it and scolds Jiro, telling him to focus since his grandfather is genuinely trying to kill him. Rago wants to help, but insists Jiro needs to handle the rest himself. Jiro, however, grabs him and tells him not to interfere. He'd already told him earlier not to come out unless he said so. Annoyed, Rago tells him to do whatever he wants then. His grandfather suddenly recalls that his old dog once warned him it wasn't the time to be sitting around reading, because Jiro was in danger, meaning the old man can also talk to animals, or at least to that particular dog. We then see a flashback of young Jiro falling out of a tree, saved at the last second by his grandfather, who scolds him harshly afterward. Jiro explains that a kitten had gotten stuck and couldn't climb down, crying in distress, and he couldn't just leave it there alone. His grandfather tells him that helping others is a noble thing, but it also requires strength and resolve without strength. It's reckless, and without resolve, it's irresponsible. He tells Jiro that he's still too young and lacking in both, and that as long as he remains that way, he needs to ask the people around him for help. Jiro asks what he's supposed to do if there's no one nearby, and his grandfather, a little exasperated by his backtalk, tells him that in the worst case, he should simply give up. Jiro refuses to accept that, so his grandfather concludes that the only option left is for him to grow stronger, both physically and mentally. But until then, he shouldn't take unnecessary risks. Back in the present, his grandfather tells him that this isn't some street fight or training exercise, it's a blood duel to the death for their respective goals. That's simply how the world Jiro has stepped into works. He'll have to slaughter fellow Mononoke, and in doing so, kill the person he used to be, because he's now part of a world of shadows, a realm without a trace of light. The very same world his grandfather fought so hard to protect him from ever having to set foot in. Jiro apologizes, admitting he acted without thinking and was foolish, but says he doesn't regret any of it. He got himself into this, and he's the one who will see it through. Frustrated, his grandfather attacks with everything he has while Rago warns that this is extremely dangerous. Jiro accepts the apology as fair, but asks him to hold on just a little longer. Right before his grandfather can land another solid hit, Jiro headbutts him, though he ends up sent flying, landing with style nonetheless. Rago asks him what on earth he's thinking. and his grandfather asks the exact same thing, telling him that looking at him now, he still sees the same helpless little boy he once was. Jiro replies that for better or worse, he's no longer alone, and just as he was taught, that means asking the people close to him for help when he needs it. And right now, that means Rego, whether he likes it or not. His grandfather is caught off guard, while Rego just stands there stunned. Jiro tells him it's nothing. He knows exactly what he's talking about. As the two of them keep bickering, his grandfather recalls the very lesson he once taught Jiro, and realizes that to him, labels like human, animal, or even Mononoke simply don't matter. His grandson treats everyone the same. He remarks that he's still the same stubborn little brat who always talks back, and ultimately decides to back down, realizing that maybe he's the one lacking resolve here. He tells Jiro he can do as he pleases. A little later, back at the house, Jiro winces in the bath from all the hits his grandfather landed on him, and takes the opportunity to apologize to Rago for dragging him into his business. Rago just laughs it off, pointing out that he was the one who took the beating, not Jiro. Still, he warns that everyone has their limits, and Jiro had better not get himself killed through recklessness, because if he dies again, it'll mean Rago saved him for nothing. A little embarrassed, Rago adds that if things get really bad, Jiro is welcome to borrow his powers, and he'd better be grateful for it. Jiro smiles, and even though he has no idea what's coming next, he's glad there are two of them facing it together, hoping they can get along well as partners. Elsewhere, Shiba contacts the old man, who notably is completely worn out, to let him know a vehicle will be sent for him the next day. The old man finds this unusually generous, and Shiba replies that of course they do, since they fully trust him, addressing him respectfully, and admits that hearing Jiro had escaped from the hospital actually came as a relief. Toshimasa asks what he means by that. The old man's name, incidentally, is Toshimasa, though Ryusuke asks him not to make him spell it out. He tells him that Jiro is going to become one of them, a fighter and a pioneer. Exactly the kind of person they need right now. With that, he ends the call, while in the background, Jiro can be heard yelling at his grandfather that they're out of soap, with his grandfather irritably telling him to wait. The next day, while Jiro is packing his things, Rago asks if he's really sure about this, since neither of them knows what's waiting for them, and this might even be the last time he sees this place. Jiro asks if he's actually worried about him, which makes Rago noticeably flustered. Jiro shrugs it off, saying there's no point being afraid, they just have to keep moving forward. When he sees who's come to pick him up, though, he can't help wondering what she's doing there. She makes it clear she's his bodyguard and escort, adding that she'll also be making sure he doesn't try to run off again, ordering him into the waiting truck. Jiro mutters that she's just bossy, and after saying goodbye to his grandfather and telling him not to drop dead while he's away, he heads off toward his new adventure. A while later, on the way to their destination, Jiro asks Ichika why on earth he has to wear this thing. She just ignores him, silently wondering why she got stuck being this guy's escort. Jiro demands she answer him and asks again why she put that on him. She tells him to be quiet, pointing out that he's essentially a prisoner now since he's no longer human, just a monster. Half human, half Mononoke. She admits she doesn't know what her boss or the higher-ups are thinking, but she's a professional who takes her job seriously. So, if she's been assigned as his bodyguard, she'll carry out her duties, even if that means protecting some pathetic half-Mononoke. Jiro complains that now she's calling him a monster, muttering that he only held back earlier because she's a girl. Just then, there's a sudden impact, and the co-driver asks the driver if he heard something. But he brushes it off as his imagination, though it clearly wasn't. Jiro nearly gets his head taken clean off. Ichika makes it very clear there are exactly two things that annoy her, Mononoke and sexist men like him. She says she barely even acknowledges his existence and tells him to shut his mouth for good. Just then, Rago appears and tells them both to be quiet, complaining that with brats like this around, he never gets any peace. Admitting he's surprised, the agency's sent someone so young to escort them, he figures they must be short-staffed. Ichika snaps at him to be quiet too, since something like him has no right to speak to her. Rago notes that the girl's got some spirit, but suggests she worry about other things right now, because at that moment the truck is suddenly swallowed by a thick fog. The driver switches on the fog lights to see better, and spots something enormous on the road. When he turns to check on his partner, the man is already decapitated. The truck crashes immediately, and Ichika steps out to investigate and realizes from the fog that they've entered a spectral zone, quickly sensing the presence of Mononoke nearby. One of the Mononoke complains that it was hoping for tastier prey, disappointed that the two agency operatives don't live up to expectations. Seeing that the bodyguard is just a young girl only adds to its disappointment in the agency, which infuriates Ichika since she's sick of constantly being called girl or kid. She responds by transforming, activating her ranger-style combat suit. The Mononoke transform as well, and once cloaked in the fog, reveal their true forms ready to enjoy their meal. Ichika proves to have impressive skill and agility, managing to dodge one attacker's strike while going on the offensive against the larger one. Her attacks land, but only superficially, and things get complicated with two different types of Mononoke to deal with at once. She figures she should target the leaner one first, but it's already behind her, slamming her into the truck. Jiro, confused, asks what's happening outside, and Rogo explains that there are Mononoke nearby. His senses picked up on the fact that they'd entered a spectral zone, explaining that foggy areas can temporarily turn into a spectral realm, a dimension separate from the human world, the domain of the Mononoke. Alarmed, Jiro asks Rogo to help him get out of his restraints, but Rogo tells him he can't, since those shackles are special, designed specifically to block spectral energy. Jiro is frustrated, realizing he needs to get outside so Ichika can remove them, but Rogo advises against it, asking if he still doesn't understand why he's wearing those restraints in the first place. He reveals that the agency and the Mononoke are essentially the same in one respect. Both only want to use them, seeing them as nothing more than tools. So there's no real reason to get involved in this fight. The smartest move, Rogo argues, would be to let them destroy each other and then simply leave. But true to form, Jiro tells him he doesn't get it at all, since he doesn't care about the agency or the Mononoke. Right now, all that matters to him is that the woman out there is fighting for their sake, and as a man, he can't just stand by and do nothing. The giant Mononoke lands a devastating blow on the truck, destroying it completely and sending Jiro flying. Rogo mocks him, pointing out that after that whole speech, he ended up looking pretty pathetic. The Mononoke notices him and mentions that it's under orders to bring him in alive, giving him only 10 seconds to leave peacefully. Otherwise, it'll devour him. It starts counting down while Ichika wonders how they possibly could have known about this transport. Jiro interrupts her thoughts, asking her to remove his restraints so he can help. Ichika retorts that she doesn't need the filthy powers of a Mononoke to handle the situation. The giant Mononoke charges at them, while Jiro keeps shouting at her to take off the restraint. Frustrated, she resists, unwilling to release him. And in that moment, we cut to a flashback of her as a child standing before a grave with her father. Everyone around them remarked what a shame it was, since Ichika, only 5 years old at the time, was the last of the line, and women couldn't inherit leadership. Even so, despite being so young, she dropped her stuffed animal and told her father that she would take over as heir to the Kishimojin clan, promising to work as hard as she could to become a great detective and make everyone proud of her. Back in the present, Jiro snaps her out of the memory, asking if she wasn't the one who claimed to take her job seriously and always fulfill her duties no matter what, because if that's true, then she needs to do whatever it takes to complete her mission, since that's what being a professional means. Ichika understands and quickly releases him. As they dodge the giant's next attack, Jiro, now free and fused with Rago's power, tears the giant Mononoke apart, while Ichika finishes off the other one in a single clean strike. With the situation under control, Ichika makes it very clear she has no intention of thanking him. Rago comments that she's an incredibly ungrateful girl, but Jiro says he doesn't need her thanks and has no plans to offer his either. She fought to protect them, and they fought to help her, so they're even. Hearing this, Ichika tells him she actually has a name, introduces herself properly, and tells him never to forget it. She'd rather he stop calling her "Hey You," and start using her actual name. Jiro agrees and asks what they're supposed to do now, and she tells him they'll just have to walk. Meanwhile, Ryusuke submits a report on everything they know about Rago and Jiro, and also informs the higher-ups that he has a proposal. As head of the 2nd Special Division, he formally requests permission to form a new team, with Jiro Azuma as one of its detectives. The higher-ups ask if he's lost his mind, wanting to turn a half-Mononoke into a secret agent. Ryusuke explains that Rago hasn't shown any direct hostility so far and actually appears to be cooperating with Jiro. Either way, it's clear the enemy is after Rago specifically, so instead of letting him rot in confinement, they could use him as the perfect bait. Jiro also comes from shinobi lineage, and since the agency has mostly only been facing harmless humans lately, Jiro already has a natural advantage, and Ryusuke is confident that combat experience will only sharpen his skills further. Ryusuke takes full responsibility for this new asset, revealing his plan for a small experimental unit of 5 operatives, including himself. The unit will include Hana Usami as his assistant, along with another rookie, forming a special anti-Mononoke unit codenamed Black Torch. He asks the higher-ups what they think of the plan. In a scene change, we see Jiro brushing his teeth, reflecting on how in just 1 week he ran into a strange cat that turned out to be a Mononoke, nearly got killed by a giant Mononoke, and was essentially saved by a cat. It's been an absurd week, but here he is regardless. Ryusuke walks up and asks how he's settling into his new life, and Jiro replies that he doesn't need to be watched so closely since he's not planning to run. Ryusuke reminds him that he did in fact escape from the hospital once already. But Jiro changes the subject, complaining that he has no life left since he's been subjected to every kind of test imaginable since arriving. Ryusuke acknowledges this but explains it's for everyone's benefit, both the agency's and his own. Jiro accepts that and asks if this is really their headquarters. Ryusuke admits that unfortunately it is, or at least the 2nd Division's base. He explains that each division has its own operational headquarters, and while they function like any ordinary company or organization on the outside, he has to admit this one is the ugliest of them all. Jiro jokes that they must have had better days, and Ryusuke corrects him, not they, but we. reminding him that he's now officially part of the team, the Black Torch unit. Jiro replies that he's only there to save his own skin, not to become anyone's subordinate. His goal is for everyone involved, including Rago, to eventually live freely, and he's willing to fight whoever necessary to make that happen, Mononoke included. Ryusuke watches him and figures it'll take some time to fully process everything, since ordinary logic doesn't seem to apply to Jiro. Just then, Ryusuke's assistant, Hana Usami, the 2nd Division's deputy chief, arrives along with the new rookie, who comes across as quite the gentleman. Jiro asks Ryusuke who this flatterer is, and Ryusuke tells him he'll be his new teammate. He introduces the rookie Reiji Kirihara, who, like the rest of them, is 17 years old and comes from a famous family of spies. Ichika comments that she only takes orders and won't put up with another troublemaker. Reiji, however, is smooth with his words, praising her as a brave, ambitious young woman who broke her clan's tradition to lead it herself, adding that she's also quite pretty, and poor Ichika falls for it completely, though Jiro points out he's obviously just flattering her. When Reiji turns his attention to Jiro, though, he admits he'd already heard about him, but seeing him in person is somehow even worse than expected. He looks at Jiro with clear disdain, asking what a nuisance like him is doing in their unit, and suggesting he go back to the hospital he came from. Jiro stands up and dares him to repeat that. Reiji replies that honesty is the best policy and calls him a half-monster. Ichika senses the tension rising between them and comments that things are getting out of hand. Usami grows worried and tells Ryusuke they should step in and stop it, but Ryusuke sees it as the perfect opportunity instead, egging them on, calling Reiji Four Eyes and Jiro Half Monster, and telling them to settle it right then and there as long as they take it seriously. Once outside, the two boys prepare to fight while Ryusuke explains to the girls that this is essentially a duel, and that it will also help solidify the team since the higher-ups had a few conditions when he pitched the idea. One of them was proving that this arrangement would actually be useful to the agency, since none of it matters if Jiro and Rago can't cooperate with the rest of the unit. That makes this the perfect chance to test him against another agent and see just how strong he really is. Usami gets ready to film the fight, planning to use the footage as evidence to show the higher-ups.